After January, I posted a video where I reflected on January and tried to gather my thoughts from a period of exploration. And I really liked that. I think that I want to continue doing that going forward with this sort of quarterly reflection series. I think it will be helpful for me in the moment to articulate my thoughts in this process of gathering, but then also helpful for me when I use this channel to look back on past versions of myself in order to more concisely snapshot where I was at any given point in this music process. And maybe it's also interesting to you, anyone who is following along and watching this channel. First and foremost, I see this channel as a sound journal where I'm just collecting things that I make week to week in order to capture where I am. Because I think it's really important to remind myself that music making, as I see it and as I want to see it, is the process of expressing where a musician is musically in a particular moment. So often when I'm thinking about music, I fall into the trap of thinking about the future and particularly who I want to be in the future. And that expresses itself negatively in my music, where I start trying to make music of who I want to be rather than the music of who I am currently. Music that expresses ideas and techniques that I want to have mastery over rather than expressing where I am in my process currently. And so this sound journal aspect of my channel is really a process of keeping myself in the now to say, what are you doing right now? And to share that. I also think that as much as I say that this channel is for me, I do really enjoy sharing it with you, the listener to this channel who might not be future me. Particularly over the past 3 months, I've had more people coming to the channel and dropping in on my process, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy engaging with you all and the little bit of back and forth that I will sometimes have with people in the comments. It's very nice. It makes me feel like I'm part of a larger musical community in a way that I don't have when I'm working just by myself. And so I see this channel also as a little bit of a front porch or an open studio for my music making practice, where you're invited to come see what I'm working on a little bit and for us to be able to talk about that and share ideas, and for me to be saying things in a public and not just a private. So this video is going to be a little reflection, and as I said, I'd like to do these quarterly, where I'm going to talk about what happened this quarter, talk about what I'm thinking about in my work right now. I show the results, but I only indirectly get at what I'm thinking about, and we're trying to work out in my work that I share here. And I'd like to every now and then articulate that a little more explicitly. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about where I want to take things in the next quarter. Because as much as I say that this is a channel documenting where I am now is always navigating towards some future. And I don't want to just be stuck in an extended present moment that is always the same, but track how the present moves towards ambitions for the future. And finally, this video is going to end with a highlight reel of some of my favorite sounds from the past 3 months. I really liked that process of closing out January with going back over what I had been working on recently and picking out some things that were my favorite. It was a nice way to review my old work. And I think I want to keep doing that. So, what happened this quarter, this past 3 months for me? Quite a lot. The first thing was coming out of January, I recorded a series of no input mixing board explanation videos where I tried to articulate and demonstrate how I approach this lovely machine as an instrument. And that went really well. I really feel like I was able to document how this thing works as a controllable instrument. And it meant that I got to engage with a lot of new people by moving from just documenting my work to expressing some more educational content about the instrument that I was exploring. I really like those educational videos and the discussion that they create. And they're a lot of hard work compared to just documenting a sound, but in a good way. I feel like that video series has helped me articulate myself and how I think about my music much more clearly. And that process is ultimately good for me as a public speaker, but also as just feeling more confident about my instrument and saying, I have learned things about this instrument. I'm really happy with that set of videos. And I think I would like to do more things like that, both for the no input mixing board and for some of the more modular synthesis types of things that I've been working on as well. Coming out of January and those explanations, I also released an album of music. It's up on Bandcamp. You can get a link to it in the description here. But it was just me working out improvisation on the no input mixing board and how I feel about noise and the way that noise is experienced. I'm really proud of the diversity of sound on that album, and there are a lot of moments in there that I really like. The album release process was nice as well. I had recorded most of the album over January while I was working through experiments with the no input mixing board. And so by the time that I had really clarified my ideas about how to use this as an instrument, the album was already done. Which in a way feels weird, because I don't think that I would make the same album again just a few months later as I did at the time. But that's exactly, as I was saying before, what I want music to be for me, is to document those where I am in a process at any given point. And so I'm glad that I made the album when I did, because it works as this snapshot for trying to articulate what was I thinking about noise and making music on a chaotic feedback system, a rather constrained chaotic feedback system, in the middle of that process of making it. I see that album as trying to articulate and work out thoughts in a way that's really important to me, about music as solving a problem or figuring things out. Music that is born from trying to figure out a musical idea. The mixing board that I'm working on now is not the mixing board that I recorded that album with or did the bulk of my no input mixing board explanations on, because I also got a new mixing board in the past 3 months, the 1402 here. And this has been such a cool upgrade. These faders allow for so much control. Oh, that's nice. Sorry, I'm getting distracted as I'm trying to talk here. But listen to the way that evolves. That's so nice. The new mixing board, 1402, the sliders are lovely. The extra channels with preamps are lovely. It has a couple of quirks, but ultimately this was a really cool acquisition that I'm really having a fun time with. And not just a fun time, but a more precise time articulating gesture on the instrument. And finally, I've been getting back into my Eurorack modular system after taking a break from it during January, working in a small case through November and December. I moved back into my 60 HP 7U case and have really been enjoying that with the fresh eyes of coming from the mixing board. I've been watching a lot of videos by Rob Hordijk, thinking about sample and hold, and I'll get into specifically what I'm thinking about a little bit later, but just working through the modular system with a new appreciation for noise and generating noise from fundamental processes that are the raw components of synthesis has been really fun. And being able to plug into something other than audio input is both a blessing and a curse. I don't think I'm ever going to leave the no input mixing board because I see it as this uniform instrument with so much positive constraint, but at the same time jumping into the world of modular with much more with a much wider palette of building blocks and the ability to control other aspects than just feedback in the loop is really exciting. On the modular system, I've switched out a couple of things to focus the case towards that building blocks principle of making music and noise from more simplified components, and to just make a few adjustments to the sound palette that I'm working with in that case. I also did my first patch from scratch in this last quarter of sound. And I think I'd like to do more of that because it forces me to talk through the process of making music in a nice way, and also stops me from meticulously editing every little thing that I say. Because I have a bad habit of taking long pauses while I'm doing these narrations, while I'm trying to think about my thoughts mid-sentence. And what that results in, I'm going to do it now, I'm sure, is all of these little cuts as I try and tighten things back together for articulating it on the channel. When I have sound running at the same time, I can't do that. And so it forces me to articulate myself in a little bit more of a continuous conversational way, which is both challenging, but in that, which is challenging, and in being challenging is, I think, a good thing. With the modular system, that I have been doing a lot of feedback and noise textures. That Patch from Scratch video was on this idea of granular looping, which was really interesting to play with. And I've also moved away on both the mixing board and on the modular system from just by default going to stereo outs on the respective systems, and instead being more intentional about how I take things out of the instrument and into my computer. Sometimes this means working in mono. Sometimes this means taking the left and right out as two separate tracks for multi-tracking so that I can control two different elements in different ways, record them separately, apply different effects to them. I think that's going to be, that's a little light bulb moment that I really appreciate having made the change on. So, what am I thinking about now? I've been watching a lot of videos by Rob Hoordijk, who was a Dutch synth designer and educator and maker of beautiful, playful music on his synthesizer system. I find his work incredibly inspiring, and there are all of these video lectures that are available here on YouTube of his, where he goes into the process of how he designs his synthesizer, how he approaches making music on it, demonstrating the different functionalities of his modules. And I feel like there's so much in there to learn. And in reflecting on that, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of what I'm calling generative sound design, where when I think of generative music, I think about algorithmic or process-based composition, where the form of a piece is indeterminate or determined by some system. It's not authored by hand, but instead by following a process. And I think that that same idea can be applied to individual sounds, where when you start to work with feedback and influencing the way that a sound is made by using processes of connectivity and cybernetics and these feedback systems, you get generativity on a waveform scale. In the terms of Curtis Rhodes and microsound, you're moving from generativity on maybe a meso time scale to a micro time scale generativity. This generative sound design leads to unpredictability, and out of unpredictability comes delight at the level of synthesis, where I don't know exactly what it's going to sound like when I construct a system of micro time generativity. The same way that a process-based composition can delight as the process unfurls, I think process-based sound design, sort of generative sound design, keeps things really exciting on the level of the specific sounds that you're hearing. And out of this and watching the videos of Rob Hordyke, I've come to have a real appreciation for sample and hold in the Eurorack system. I want to do a lot more with audio rate sample and hold. And every time that I watch one of Rob Hordyke's videos, things start to get really interesting when he brings in the sample and hold. And when he's talking about his modules, there are sample and holds built into the oscillators, the envelope generators. They just sneak into these little places, and using them, sound emerges in a way that is beautiful across the whole frequency range of the oscillator. Alongside this idea of generative sound design, I'm also very interested in extending the length of performances that I do. I've been trying to think about pushing my no input mixing board pieces to be longer and longer, and to explore more ambient music as well as just longer forms in general in improvisation. I'm really interested in continuing my development as an instrumentalist of the no input mixing board, and that means being comfortable performing on it for a longer period of time and trying to find improvisational instincts and structures that can stay engaged with a set of listeners for a longer period of time. Part of the way that I'm coming to that right now is this idea of impressionistic performance. Things like the idea of a tone poem or mimicry or tableau, to instead of having a narrative form that a musical piece is following, to present a series of impressions. Present an idea and then transition to another idea to find an interesting state in space and then move to another one and carry this musical presence, the set of musical ideas to the listener, one after the other as a series of impressions. I see it sort of like a game of charades, or even the way that charades historically can be thought of as a form of performed riddle. I haven't clarified these thoughts yet, but right now I'm in the middle of working through this idea of impressions in music. And not necessarily mimicking specific things, but to travel through a set of aesthetic experiences or feelings, one after the next, as a way to string together a longer improvisation. And so that brings me into the section of where do I want to go next? Of course, where I will always be a navigation between where I am and where I want to go. But I think it's useful right now to point to a couple of spots on the map and say, this is the direction that I want to be heading. And first and foremost among those is, like I said, this idea of more extended performance with the no input mixing board. I want to develop this technique to the point that I'm comfortable performing it for a longer period of time. And I think that involves this impressionistic style of performance that I'm talking about. I think it also involves more explorations with ambient and drone music. The International Drone Day is coming up later this month, and I'm really excited to engage with that with the mixing board. I think I want to work up to having a long drone and really force myself to slow down for longer drones with the mixing board as well. With the modular system, I see myself, in a way, I've been working with the modular system for much longer than the mixing board, but I also feel newer or less firm in my techniques with the modular system than I do the mixing board. And I want to approach the modular system more like the mixing board in that I am attempting to identify the techniques that I'm using for making my music on that instrument. And so continuing with patches and techniques on the modular system, but with the real sort of overall intention of getting to where I'm at with the mixing board with my modular system, to be able to approach it more intentionally. It's just a much more complex system. And so it can do a lot more, but that also takes a lot more effort and control to be in control of making it do things. I also want to do more educational content on this channel, like the no input mixing board explanations that I did this past 3 months. I really enjoy them. I feel like, particularly with the mixing board, I was trying to fill a gap of from between where I was when I started the mixing board and where I had gotten to through my explorations of it. And there wasn't a lot of content for this controlled method of the mixing board as an instrument in the way that I really wanted to approach it. And so there was a clear gap that I could say, I have something here that I want to share that I think will be useful to people who were in the same position that I was when I was starting out. And I think that I can do that for some more things on the mixing board. There are already several more techniques that I want to catalog and articulate more explicitly from the explorations that I've done in the past few months with this. But for the modular system as well, I think that there are ideas in modular synthesis that if I had known them when I had started, I could have moved to where I am in a much more linear way. I feel like in the process of learning modular synthesis, I ended up taking a circuitous route to where I am, in part because there aren't resources for the type of music that I want to be making. I didn't even know what the music that I wanted to be making was. I still don't entirely, but I feel like I have a much better... I mean, honestly, I just want to talk about noise, and I want to talk about Rob Hordike's work and sample and hold, and just all of the cool ways that you can approach an instrument, even one that's a fairly traditional synthesizer, and make it do really wild, out there things that are still playful and delightful. So I'm going to talk about those some, I think. I don't want to get too focused on particulars until I do them, Uh, but it's a form of content that I really enjoy. And I feel like it's good for me and it's good for the community that I want to be a part of for me to make more videos like that. And as I'm articulating goals here, I want to articulate a final goal, which is just to enjoy sound and noise and not get too caught up about being something other than where I am. Because I don't mind where I am right now. I sometimes forget this, but I just really enjoy these little textures and squeaks and chirps. And my main goal with anything that I want to do going forward is to just give myself more opportunities to thrive in this sound. So remember that, me. Just enjoy it. If you have stuck around listening to me ramble through this quarterly reflection, I appreciate it. And thank you for coming to the front porch of my music exploration process here. Thank you for looking into my open studio, and I hope you find some good sounds. Here are some of my favorite selections from what I have made over the past 3 months. I hope that you enjoy them. I hope that future me enjoys them. And I know that I'm going to enjoy them right now because they're my favorite parts.